Ladies and gentlemen watching, today I am going to talk to you about TripAdvisor, reviews, Black Mirror, loads of crazy stuff. So let's get going. When you want to go to a restaurant, you want a really nice place to eat out, or you've decided you're going to splash out on a new mobile phone, what do? Well, if you're like me, you probably read a few reviews before you buy. I'm not sure if any of you out here have checked out websites such as TripAdvisor or Amazon for your purchases, but I'm pretty sure that before you go to a restaurant or book a hotel for your holiday, you've probably at least checked out 1 or 2 reviews on these websites before you give away your hard-earned cash. I used to go by the idea that you only really write a review if you're unhappy. I mean, I can't really be bothered to sit down and write a review because I had a normal, good time at a restaurant. I mean, maybe if I had the best time of my life, but unless I was really pissed off, I probably wouldn't bother writing a review. So I always take reviews with a pinch of salt. But are the reviews, when you see 5 stars, best night ever, are they real? Who even writes these reviews? I mean, it's definitely not me most of the time. Well, I'm going to tell you a few stories today. Firstly, I'm going to tell you about the Shed at Dulwich. The Shed at Dulwich is a restaurant, and it's in London. And it's one of the most sought-after tables in the capital of the UK. So, what happened? Why is this even an interesting story that I want to tell you about? Well, a guy called Uber Butler, who works for Vice, ran London's #1 TripAdvisor rated restaurant. Uber Butler, if you've heard of him before, you might know that he's very famous for faking things online. He's got loads of YouTube videos where he gets into Paris Fashion Week, he sends other people to pose as him on the radio, and he faked a restaurant. Well, before he got to faking the Shed at Dulwich, he was actually an employee of other restaurants, and he was paid as a writer to write fake reviews. And that's how he got the idea to fake the entire restaurant himself. So Uber Butler lived in an overpriced shed in Dulwich. I mean, it's London. We've all heard stories of people having to live in a tent because they can't afford rent, or people swimming down the Thames to work instead of paying for the oyster because it's like 3 times the price of Paris for an Oyster card. So we know London's expensive. But he literally lives in a garden shed, and he pays the same rent I do for a studio flat. That's just crazy. So he decided, because all of his mates called it the Shed, to open a restaurant called the Shed at Dulwich, because he lives in Dulwich. So what did he do? Well, first of all, he created this restaurant on TripAdvisor. And he decided to make it work by getting his friends to write the fake reviews. And they all wrote reviews, obviously saying that they had an amazing time, it was the best experience ever, this kind of thing. But he was very careful. He had a strategic approach to making this work, because the key thing was consistency. I mean, nobody would believe it if one of his mates wrote, "Oh, you know, I had such a good steak and kidney pie," and the other was like, "Oh, best vegan restaurant ever." That just would have failed immediately. So he was very careful about having consistent messages going out on the fake reviews, and he decided that there were certain key things that had to match up. Firstly, you eat outside. So there is no internal seating, you eat outside at the shed. So you eat in his garden, basically. Secondly, it's weird AF. This place is super weird, but quirky as sells, you know. People like that, like the hipster, sitting on a bicycle seat, this kind of thing. People love that. Thirdly, it's homely. Homely means tiny. You know, like when you say, oh yeah, that's interesting, with that way of speaking, you do not mean interesting. So homely means it's really small. And then finally, it's appointment only. You cannot show up at this restaurant. And this was key because at the end of the day, he did not want people showing up to the garden that he lives in. And also, that obviously makes it seem exclusive, and we all know how Instagram and things work. The more exclusive, the better. So this was the plan. And in order for it to work, you had to also understand how TripAdvisor works. So for TripAdvisor to work, you need a phone, because TripAdvisor will call you to verify that you actually exist. So that's fine. He got a phone and a new number and registered that as The Shed at Dulwich. And then you need a website. So he created a website, which you can check out. I did this myself when writing the speech. The website is still there, and it is still hilarious. So the website is called theshedatdulwich.com, and it shows photos of the food that you can eat at the restaurant. So obviously he had to cook some food. I say cook because it's interesting. So he took some photos of this fake food with his friends. The starter was a pan-fried shallot with a side of seafoam and parsley. This was not really what he cooked. Actually, it was a plate on which he put a toilet block covered with honey and just a bit of like grass. It looks quite effective, honestly. It looks like a pan-fried shallot. And the main, I will try not to laugh too much, was a ham hock with honey and seasoning. And what did Uber Butler do? He literally took a photo of his ankle with an egg placed on it. If you look at the photo on the website, you can't tell at all that this is a photo of his very own foot, but I assure you it is. Then, in order to make the restaurant really seem unusual and eye-catching, they don't serve meals, they serve moods. So you could have love. Love is a meal that makes your heart swell. So the idea behind this meal is actually that it's heart attack inducing. You could eat contemplation, which is a deconstructed beef stew that comes with a warmed beef tea. Delicious. Or you could have comfort. This is a soup served in a 600 thread count Egyptian cotton bowl. Doesn't it all sound wonderful? And then step 3 of the TripAdvisor process began. So he began at position number 18,190 of all restaurants in London. So his friends started posting reviews, and the reviews covered things such as, I quote, "They do not offer online bookings, so I went down the traditional route and picked up the phone. Well, it took just over a week of phone calls to get through and finally book a table. The whole experience was fantastic. As the sun was setting, we were offered blankets. We politely declined. One had a stain on, but a nice touch. Adds to the al fresco feel. Most of the food is homegrown. What a delightful idea." So you can see his friends really captured the essence of the restaurant that he was going for. And 1 month in, people started noticing the restaurant on TripAdvisor. People started phoning to book a table, but of course it was always fully booked. And they kept posting more and more fake reviews. And more reviews equals more buzz, more phone calls, and climbing up the rankings on TripAdvisor. If you're sharing a booth, I suggest you swap over now. 3 months in to the project, the restaurant, The Shed at Dulwich, had reached number 10,000 on TripAdvisor. So as you can see, they climbed from 18,190 to position 10,000. And this is when a PR agency phoned Uber saying that they wanted to represent the restaurant in order to help them get more well-known. Of course, this just seemed hilarious to Uber Butler, but he thought, why not? Let's see what they have to offer. And in the end, the agency suggested that he post people potted plants, to capture the essence of the shed. I don't think he actually did this. I don't think it was really necessary. But, I think the PR agency had it spot on, to be honest with you. When the restaurant reached number 121 on TripAdvisor, TV presenters were trying to pull strings using their work email addresses to try and get a table. When they reached number 91 on TripAdvisor, they were taking bookings and then cancelling them afterwards. So he'd agree, when someone would phone, he'd say, yes, I have a table in 3 months' time. And then 5 minutes later, he'd phone back and say, oh, I'm terribly sorry, the table is no longer available, just to make people really tempted to come to his restaurant. And people were going crazy. Nobody could get a table, and they'd accept ridiculous suggestions. He would say, oh, I'm afraid that night we have an erotic photo shoot down at the restaurant. Is that a problem for you? And people would be like, no, it's totally fine. Anything to get a table. People even estimated the location of his shed on Google Maps and sent him gifts to try and get a seat at the restaurant. This is how crazy it was going. And 6 months later, they did it. He reached number 1 on TripAdvisor. He was better rated than Michelin-starred restaurants. When his restaurant didn't even exist, they had never opened their doors. But the phone did not stop ringing. It was the most exclusive place to go in London. So he decided to give the people what they wanted and open the doors for one night only. And so he had to obviously clean up the garden. He had to find some chairs. He had to cook food for all the people he'd invited. So they decided it was going to be a press night, because obviously he couldn't risk actually taking people's money for what he was about to serve them, which was dressed up ready meals. So they went to, I think it was Iceland, a really cheapo supermarket, and bought a ton of ready meals. And they dressed them up with herbs and flowers, making it look fancy, but it was just like frozen lasagna. The cost price was £1 a person for the meal, and they even had a DJ that they hired, who I think was probably also one of their friends, and he was playing the sounds of a restaurant, so that as you approached, you could hear the sounds of a restaurant, but it was just a DJ. And instead of a turntable, he had a microwave ping sound, just to make it seem even more authentic. Half the tables were actually filled with actors and his friends pretending to be clients, going, this is delicious, it's so good. And he even had 2 of his friends sat on the roof of the shed. I mean, why not? But all of this, I had to make it seem authentic. I had to match the reviews. So he had people with blankets. He even got a few chickens to roam around. And when people arrived, they had to phone to say, I'm here, I'm at the shed at an undisclosed location nearby. He then blindfolded people with his shirt and led them down the first half of the garden so that they wouldn't see that it was just a person's garden with like bicycles up against the wall and stuff. And then people came in, they were seated, and the waitress came over and analysed their mood in order to choose the meal for them. So then people were served a cup of soup in a mug and microwave lasagna. So all in all, it sounds like a great night, and as it was free, people loved it. And actually, people really, really had a great time, said they'd recommend it, they'd definitely come back. Someone was even there from Paris. They'd been in Paris the night before at some fancy restaurant, and then they ate at a guy's shed. So just shows you that anything can get by TripAdvisor. But what about Amazon? I mean, I'm not sure if most of you use Amazon, because here in France I find that Fnac is actually a bit better than Amazon. You can get most stuff and Amazon just seems a bit unreliable in my experience. But in the UK, I was an Amazon fiend. I'd buy everything on Amazon. In fact, I think my boyfriend at one point wanted to block my account because I really love Amazon. It's just so fast and convenient. Oh, so good. Anyway, in order to write a review on Amazon, you have to have actually bought the item that you're reviewing. So what happens on Amazon with fake reviews is that people are paid to buy an item and then they write a review about it. But this isn't the only way fake reviews happen on Amazon. You might have also come across the brushing scandal. Brushing is what happens, it's not directly Amazon's fault, but what happens is that your address and your name are sold to another company, and then so it's a company that sells their products on Amazon. And so the seller creates an account with your account details. They send you, you buy basically the goods, so that there's a paper trail, and you would receive random parcels at your house that you have never ordered, and then they post a review from your account with 5 stars, best product. And the problem is that there's a paper trail because you have an account in your name, the product arrived at your address, you received the product, you probably opened it because you were like, hey, what's in this Amazon parcel with my name on it? And inside you'll find something totally random that you did not order. And this happens all the time. So you'll just get parcels showing up and you see an account with your name on that's not actually you, posting all these reviews about a ton of random stuff you've never even purchased. And this just shows you that on Amazon, all those reviews, when you see 300 reviews, 5 stars and stuff, you really shouldn't trust it. But it's not only Amazon. This also happens in restaurants. We might have restaurant staff members themselves writing the reviews. I worked in a pub for a few months before I came to France, and we had a bonus scheme that functioned solely on TripAdvisor reviews. So people were very tempted, obviously, to write reviews themselves, because if we didn't get enough good reviews, we didn't get a bonus. So you can just see that the whole thing is totally fake. But there's also psychology itself behind reviews. And a 5-star review is actually worse than a 4.8 or 4.7 star review. This is because people think that the 5 stars is fake and they don't believe it. So it's actually better for a company to have a 4.8 or 4.7 star review. This would bring them more orders on a website or more people to their restaurant. The audit of reviews itself has actually been proven to be very important in your choice-making process. This is because there's this theory that you read the first things and then you remember the last thing you read, and then the middle just kind of blurs out in your head, you don't really remember it. But not only this, reviews make us lazy. This is because when we decide to buy something, we'd rather just read what someone else thinks. You can spend ages on your laptop just flicking through reviews, and essentially you actually get to hand over the decision-making process to someone else. So psychologically, you feel better about your purchase, and you feel better about not making the decision. So this is why reviews work. And we could even ask where all of these reviews lead us. What is the future with all these fake reviews, but yet everybody wants to read reviews in order to do anything? And I'm sure some of you might have seen the Black Mirror episode, Nosedive. This is an episode that I particularly like because it's not too creepy. Quite a lot of Black Mirror episodes are a bit creepy. This one is more realistic, yet creepy, I would say, because there is a system like this happening in China. So what happens is the girl has her phone and she flicks to review people. So if someone serves her a coffee, she reviews them. Or if you smile at the person in the lift going to work, you review them. And it's a bit like Instagram, I guess, but Instagram rating system, and you always have to rate people. But it goes further than this, because in the episode, at a certain point, she gets a bad review and her score starts going down. So she can no longer rent the apartment she wants. She has to queue in the really long queue to rent a car, and then she can only rent an old-fashioned car, not a new car. And she gets uninvited from a wedding because her ranking is so low, and basically her whole life falls to pieces simply because of the star review rating that's based on superficiality. Anyway, perhaps I'm coming across a bit paranoid, thinking that all of our social behaviours are going to be impacted upon by review systems. But as you can see, these reviews themselves do say something about our world and about what's changing with social media and what's happening in the future. And I really do think that now, when you read a review, you should question whether it's accurate or not. You should definitely question if that person even bought it. If you have a new item on Amazon that's only been available for the last 2 months and it has 40 5-star reviews, those reviews are probably fake. So next time you look on TripAdvisor to find a restaurant to go to, maybe just double check, or just go there yourself and form your own opinion.